So as Jessie said, I'm Florence Eshalomi. I'm the MP for Vauxhall in South London, and I was elected South London. I was elected in 2019 general election, and I was recently appointed the Shadow Minister for Democracy and Devolution. And it is really good to be following two local councillors, because I served as a Lambeth councillor, and I also served as an assembly member for Lambeth and Southwark. So I can't get enough of elections, right? And I think, talking about elections, we are meeting today at a really crucial time for not just the country, but for trust in our democratic processes. And not just here in the UK, but right across the world. This year, we're going to see billions of people go to the polls. They're all going to cast their votes, from India to Mexico, to the US, to Ghana. And if the Prime Minister doesn't bottle it, even in the UK, we'll have elections. And if we just pause to think about that so many people, not just here, but across the world, can choose their representatives, is something that we've really got to cherish and equally celebrate. But for those elections to be free and fair, is something that all of us must continue to fight for. And as an MP, and I look at the fact that my constituents are understandably quite angry. They're angry about the state of politics in the UK. I see this in my inbox on a weekly basis. I see it at my regular advice surgeries. They're angry about the decline of our schools, angry about hospitals, public services. They're angry about the broken housing market, driving up rents and house prices. They're angry about countless scandals in Westminster that have eroded trust in politics. I celebrated 4 years as an MP in December, and there was a period where I was scared to look at the front papers, because I was thinking, what scandal is going to be on the front of the daily papers again? But I do believe, and I know that you all believe, that the power of a vote can be a force for change and renewal against this climate of anger. It gives people a chance to have a say in their local services, regional services, and national issues that impact all their daily lives. It provides a potential for national renewal. And there is nothing more important than that. That is a prize worth fighting for. And that's why the work that all of you in this room do, and those of you online do, is so important in that space. It's so critical. And I think back to when I was growing up in Brixton on the council estate, and I saw that my local community suffered from a lack of representation on the authorities that decided so much about our daily lives. The fact that too many people who were in charge didn't actually reflect the communities they served. And what did I do? At 25, in addition to going out in the West End, I put myself forward to stand. And I think back to that time, and it was actually quite scary. It was one of the scariest things I'd done, but I knew that my anger at Lambeth Council wouldn't change unless I was able to engage in that very system that was causing my frustration. I'm the eldest of 3 girls, and that's one thing that my mum installed in me. You have to be the change. You have to be part of that change. And I feel proud, and I do not take it for granted at all, that I'm now the MP for the area that I grew up in, being able to speak and amplify the voices of my constituents directly to government ministers. But this was only possible because the power of voting and taking part. If people don't trust our system, they won't see the point of voting. They won't feel part of that decision-making process. They're going to switch off from politics. Their voice will be lost in the political system, and we are all the poorer for it. Because voter and political apathy robs us all of the strength that a truly representative democracy requires. And that's why it matters so much that we restore trust in our political and electoral system. And if we're really honest with ourselves, too often it can feel that the conversations around democracy are abstract and theoretical. But the ability of the electoral system to represent people and deliver change is critical to ensuring that people are motivated to take part in the first instance. Now let's look at some of the changes. Under this government, we've seen the introduction and the implementation of the Flagship Elections Act. And, let's give credit where credit is due. Some of the measures are welcomed. Changes to make it easier for disabled people to vote are positive, as are the steps taken to modernize some of the methods we use for voter registration. But I'm concerned about the impact of the bill, which will have on people's access to voting and trust in our electoral system. We all agree that no legitimate voter should be locked out of democracy. But a recent all-party parliamentary group report found that there was a real risk of potential racial and disability discrimination because of the photo ID requirement introduced by the Tories in the Election Act. On top of this, introducing a time limit on postal vote registration could massively increase the burden on already stretched electoral administrators. We must also be aware of the impact of the extension of the overseas voting rules beyond the 15-year rule. Under this rule, as it stands, expats living abroad for more than 15 years will be able to get on the electoral register and vote. This has the potential to open up huge loopholes in donation laws. Again, something I know that a number of you have been looking at. And it could give more people in hostile foreign states the green light to get onto our electoral register and flood money into our political system. And we've got to be honest, this isn't an empty threat. There's clear evidence that these actors are already attempting to influence UK democracy. Just last year, we saw a cyber attack on Britain's Electoral Commission. And with so many people going to the polls within this year, we've got to redouble our efforts to protect our democracy from hostile actors. And sticking to that theme of hostile actors and technology, the next general election will be the first one since the AI technologies have been widely available across the world. This isn't the first election influenced by new technology, and the evolution of TV has changed how people consume politics throughout the 20th century. And in the 21st century, we've seen the emergence of the internet and social media, and this can have a huge impact on how we engage with news, politics, and information. And yes, change is inevitable. Change can be good, but we must be proactive in confronting the challenges of today's technological environment and the impact it will have on our democracy. And with the emergence of AI, the creation of convincing imitations and distribution of disinformation has become easier and easier, something we must not lose sight of. And the rapid advancement of this technology makes it impossible to say exactly what we will face when it comes to the next election. It makes dealing with this disinformation even harder. But it also makes it even more vital that we are active in ensuring that our politics is free and fair, not just in the UK, but across our collective democracies. But we must also look at how our current system works, because we've already seen how disinformation thrives when, if we're honest, politicians are spreading it for their own gain and people don't believe we're being honest with them. We must create trust in our political system. And this trust is anchored in the hope and belief that politics actually does matter. It makes a difference. That your vote, that one single X or a squiggle or a dot, or on some ballot papers, a very rude swear word, that one vote can bring the improvement that we so badly need. That you have a say in how your local community is run, and that the decision makers are using their powers fairly. But how do we get there? I think the answer comes in 3 strands. Firstly, we must set higher standards in public life. This cannot be understated. No more VIP lanes, thank you very much. No more breaking the rules that you are setting for everyone else. Why is it that there's a culture that people think that the lawmakers are able to break the law? That's wrong. I remember during the pandemic seeing how hard frontline workers at St. Thomas's Hospital in my constituency, at the various supermarkets, were working hard. And guess what? They all managed to stay within the COVID rules. They didn't break any rules. They all complied. They weren't having parties. They were socially distanced. They didn't see family members. And then only to find out that those that were setting the rules were flouting them right at the heart of government. And then that ministers and MPs and officials were fast-tracking contracts, government contracts. As this reputational damage continues to slip out in media coverage after media coverage, the trust it does to our political system cannot be understated, and it must never be repeated. Secondly, we need to ensure that local communities really feel that they have the power to create the change in their area. And as someone who's represented communities at 3 levels of government, I know that there is immense hunger for that change in our political system. But I'll be honest with you, I also know how frustrating it feels when things are happening in your area and you feel that those things are happening to you, not with you. We hear that from constituents, we hear that from residents. And this switches people off from politics, and it erodes the belief that their voice matters. We need to move away from this centralized control that Westminster knows best, and we need to move towards one that puts communities at the heart of what we're doing. We need to trust them more. And we only need to look at the work that Andy has done in Manchester or Sadiq here in London to see this power and how it could be unleashed across the country. And finally, and linked to this, we need to look at how we make sure everyone is heard in our political system. This means making our politics representative of the whole country. It means that anyone with a desire to stand for office and serve their local community feels empowered to do so. It means that politicians use the power they have to improve the lives of people around them. That's why I was pleased to hear Keir announce last week that under Labour, politics won't just be a side hobby, but it's going to be rooted in responsibility of service, focused on the potential for national renewal. And I think about my role as the Shadow Minister for Democracy and Devolution, and I think we do have a lot more to do to break down these barriers that stop people having a say. We need to look at how we can encourage people to take part across all different sections of society, making sure we're regularly speaking to everyone in our communities and that our institutions are welcoming places. The joy of bringing community groups, local businesses, young people to Parliament. This is your Parliament, come in, come and see them. I've been so proud to be able to do that as an Assembly member, as a councillor, bringing people to the town hall, bringing them to City Hall. They need to feel that these are their places. It's not for us as the politicians, it's for them, it's for everybody. They are public buildings. But the reality is so many people have never walked into their town halls. So many people haven't been to City Hall. There's just one bus from Brixton, where I live, to Westminster. So many people haven't been to Parliament. And on this note, I'm delighted that our Shadow Secretary of State for Women and Equalities announced plans to make every political party publish data on the diversity of candidates for parliamentary elections in England, Scotland, and Wales. And I think over time, this transparency will help shine a light on the need for diversity in our politics. And I know the immense frustration that many 16 and 17-year-olds will face at the next general election. These are young people who are finding their feet in the world. They're applying for jobs. They may be thinking about going to university. Some of them may be thinking about moving out, but gosh, that's so expensive now. And a lot of them are just thinking, what's next? What am I going to do? Yet their first experience of politics is likely to be one of frustration. So on the one hand, they're old enough to make these life-changing decisions about their future, but yet they can't vote. And yet the votes and what will happen will impact the choices around them. That's why the changes are wrong. The current changes are wrong, and it damages trust in young people. And I'm proud that as a long-standing campaigner, that the next Labour government would extend the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds. And I'll just finish by saying that if we are really honest, restoring trust in our democratic system will not be easy. It's not going to happen overnight. But equally, it's not going to happen if we all don't redouble our efforts. All the work that you are doing will make that possible. But there is so much at stake if we do it right. And I feel that only then can we create a more resilient politics, a politics where there's a belief of the power of democracy to change for good, a politics of hope, a politics of empowering communities. And there is nothing more fundamental than that. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can get the other chair back on the, someone else. Thanks, Florence. I know a lot of people will be feeling quite heartened and hopefully inspired and encouraged in that speech. There was a lot in it, but I'd also know that people will have a few questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask people if they can to keep your questions and comments really brief. I'm going to take about 5 because I know we're quite kind of pushed for time. So if it's a comment or a question under 30 seconds, that would be amazing. And I'm going to look particularly for anyone in terms of gender and inclusion. I'd like to see some different people putting their hands up, and I will ask you first. So let me see. Yes, we have a lady here in a black and white dress. We have a lady here at the very back, Francis, and someone here in a red scarf, a gentleman here in the black shirt, I think, and we will we'll come to Josiah in the front with the red trousers and an online one. Okay, yes, and we'll take the online one as well.
Hi, that was a really great speech. Thank you. I'm Liz Fate from Centenary Action. We campaign for equal representation for women in Parliament. So I was really pleased to hear your emphasis on representation and on enacting 106. And I just also, in terms of when you're talking about kind of restoring that faith in politics, what your thoughts are on the sort of democratic deficit faced by women, that we've only got 35% of women MPs, but we're 51% of population. What more can be done about that? Thank you.
Thanks, Florence, and congratulations on your job. I'm Frances Crook. I'm a co-convener of the Commission on Political Power. I have 2 very quick questions. One is, Labour in 97, and I'm very old, so I remember it, came in with a Human Rights Act, devolution of Scotland and Wales, freedom of information, real constitutional change. Now, what I hear from Labour now is votes at 16 for general elections. Of course, it's already the case in devolved nations, and voting on a Wednesday. Now, that's not a great plan. So that's my first. What else is my question? Second question, Keir Starmer promised following Gordon Brown's review that there would be a consultation on the future of the House of Lords. And what has happened to that?
Hi, Florence. My name's Alice. I work with the Electoral Commission in the policy team. I was just wondering, 2-part question, what would be your kind of key policy priorities coming into the job as Minister for Democracy? And sort of before that, do you think there's anything that can be done now to protect this election from some of the challenges that you've mentioned around foreign influence, hostile actors, disinformation, and AI? So two-part question there. Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you, everyone. Really, really good questions. On your point, Liz, and I think, just really important. For me, it's not just about women standing when they make that leap to stand and put themselves forward. The data also suggests, and it's not just in Parliament, it's in local government, the people that are more likely to stand down after 1 or 2 terms are the women. So there's something wrong in terms of women not feeling that when they then get elected, they're supported, the misogyny, the sexism that they face. On top of that, I think about the fact that some of the issues I faced in these short 4 years already. And I think, we shouldn't dismiss that by saying you've got to be thick-skinned. We've got to look at why we feel it's appropriate. Yes, be angry. Yes, be frustrated, but do not send me death threats for me just simply trying to carry out my job. That's what I face on a regular basis. Do not tell me to go back home because I was born here. I'm not going anywhere. The levels of racism that female politicians face. And I think we need to look at how we can support women who are preparing to come forward and put themselves forward. So when I look at the mentoring I do with some young women, I'm very honest with them about what my role entails, the good and the bad sides. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I do that to strengthen them, to say, yes, there are challenges. Yes, there are days when you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do this. But there's the support network. I'm sure your organization do that. There are many charities, organizations that support female candidates. There are many male colleagues that support female candidates as well. We've got to talk about the male politicians who do that. And I think it's how we get that message out to say that we need more women to come forward, but equally we do need to talk about the level of misogyny and sexist abuse that female politicians also face, and how do we root that out? Another issue on that is around childcare. More likely female candidates and politicians are taking on most of the childcare. So the discussions that we're having nationally about childcare will impact those people thinking about standing. So, range of areas where we can make it easier for those female candidates to come forward and stand. On your point, Francis, I wasn't old enough to vote in 97, but I do remember the 97 election and just that sense of hope and sense of change. And, there were a number of good things that came out from that Labour government. And I think we're at a stage where I think about the fact that over the last 4 years, we've had so many changes in terms of whether it's Prime Minister, Secretary of States, that destabilization in politics right at the national level. It's a case of, I think, people just want some stability. If Labour were to win, we have to earn the right to win. Nothing's guaranteed. And we've got to fight for every vote. But then if Labour do win, what next? What I would want to see in the area of democracy, and I think something, which I've spoken about, is around how we restore that trust. So the fact that at the current time, the person who advises the Prime Minister on members' interests and ethics reports to the Prime Minister doesn't make sense. So when I was in the shadow cabinet office with Angela Rayner, this was an area that we pushed on in terms of there should be a truly independent ethics advisor, independent of Parliament, who's able to determine on ministers' interests. If we're honest, the current system that we have of a COBA doesn't really work. And we've seen so many scandals where, I just thought the fact that we were voting on the Owen Paterson issue and making changes to that, could we not see that that was wrong? So one of the things that will change under Labour in terms of restoring trust in politics and devolution will be around that. You cited the Gordon Brown Commission. I'm slowly going through it in addition to going through the regular casework. And I think, there are some exciting things in there. And it comes up time and time again, the issue around the House of Lords. I think, again, if all of you have been watching TV and some of the media stuff, some of the appointments in the House of Lords, where, if we're honest, you can get appointed if depending on who you know now. It's not on merit, it's not on what you've done, and that needs to change. That's another area where people feel actually this isn't working. So one change that I know that Labour will bring in, which I hope that there will be support for, is being honest about changing the House of Lords. We will call for an elected House of Lords and making sure that the House of Lords are representing the regions and the nations, and would also want to ban on hereditary prayers. I think it's not right that outgoing ministers are able to select people based on who they know. So I think there needs to be a lot more scrutiny on that. And I think that's a key area that will bring about the change. I don't think we should abolish the House of Lords, because having taken my first bill committee through Parliament last year, the work that the Lords do is really beneficial and really important. Some of the changes that they put forward, which all the changes, the government voted them down, really sensible changes. So there is a role for the House of Lords, but the current overinflated, ballooned House of Lords isn't working. On your point, Alice, like I said, I think the ethics appointment that Labour would push is a key area in terms of cleaning up some of the stuff around politics. That's really important. And as we are getting closer to a general election, we've got to be continuing the discussions with the major social media companies. I think there were chances in the online safety bill that we missed. One of the key areas that Labour was pushing for in the recommendations was around the fact that the directors should be publicly liable. At the moment, it's the companies, because I think until those directors take ownership of what's being pumped out on their different platforms, they'll just dismiss it. So I think we've all seen some of the deep fakes that have come about with Keir, with Rishi even, and also with Sadiq. As we get closer to the election, it's a case of what's real and what isn't. The fact that someone can impersonate a candidate's voice, someone can doctor a picture, someone can generate images, is quite worrying. And it's a case of working with the key media outlets to ensure that there's a code of practice that they're all going to sign up to, something around that. And making sure that the government's own websites are, in terms of verifying information, that's key. Making sure that we are working, obviously the BBC is the national broadcaster, you know, what's going out in there is verified, but equally the online platforms as well, looking at if there's anything more that needs to be done on that as we get closer to the election. Because I think the days of people consuming their news and information via you know, traditional print media, those days have gone. It's fast paced, it's fast changing. When something happens within 10 minutes, everyone knows about it, but how do you verify it? So it's really, really important that we do that, and all of that is sorted before we have an election.
So we do have a few comments. What I'll say is that you don't have to answer, because I know we're quite pressed for time now. So people will give a comment or a question, and feel free just to answer the ones that you've got time to, if that's all right. Right, cool, okay. And literally 30 seconds less.
Just have a quick reminder who we confirmed is asking questions before. Gavin. Thanks so much, Florence, for being here. Just question about, you rightly cited that APPG report on voter ID and how it impacts disabled people. I just wanted to know what Labour's plans would be around voter ID, and if there's any plans maybe to change it or to repeal it altogether.
Rich. Hi, I'm Rich Wilson. I'd just love to hear what you honestly, given the crisis we're in. I mean, a lovely speech. It was excellent and really fresh. But we're in crisis, right? We know our democracy is in crisis. Parliament themselves have called the social tech companies in respect of democracy digital gangsters. And we've got the climate crisis, the poly crisis. Do you really believe simply shoring up our existing representative democracy is enough? And I'll give you one quick example. I was talking to a councillor just before Christmas, saying to her, if we doubled the amount of money you get, if Starmer doubles your budget, will you have enough to cover infrastructure, roads, increase of the cost of staff? She says, absolutely not. So, and this points to the point is that don't we need a fundamental transformation in what it means to be supporting all of us in society to rise to the challenge? Even having people like you in Parliament is wonderful. Of course, it's phenomenal, but but it's like, you know, if you want to be truly representative of the country, we need to use methods like citizens' assemblies, etc. So I'd just love to hear what, from your heart, you know, if you could start designing a new democracy when you get into power next week, later this year, what that would look like.
I've got my 6-year-old to play next week.
Thanks very much. Josiah Mortimer from Byline Times. I would just second the question on voter ID. You said it's wrong, so will Labour repeal it in government? And then just secondly, the honour system has obviously been in the news massively over the past few days. Does Labour think do you think it's corrupt? It's a corrupt honour system, and again, you know, what would Labour do to reform it? And I think included in that is the House of Lords. It sounds a little bit like you're shying away from a complete overhaul of the House of Lords. So is an elected second chamber still on the table? Thanks.
Suzanne, I think we have one question from our online participants.
Hi, good morning, sister. Thank you so much for coming on. You've shared some really wonderful nuggets. Yeah, so I'm Ian Woolley. I'm from 50/50 Parliament, and I am looking to become a PPC as well. I'm in the Co-op BAME, Co-op Women, LWN, Bernie Grant, etc. I'm just wondering, how do you think that we can allow for further scrutiny? Because obviously financial is a barrier for underrepresented groups, and how do we see ourselves getting a seat at the table?
As I mentioned, just feel free to.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll take those in reversed order. Thanks for your question, Imran. My general thing is, if there isn't a seat, bring your own. We will make sure we are at the table, and it's really important that all our voices are there. Yes, finance is a big barrier for underrepresented groups in terms of standing for public office. The days you commit to campaigning, if you're in a full-time job, you can't just suddenly tell your employer, I'm going to be away from Monday to Wednesday campaign. They'll look at you and say, well, actually, you're paid to be in the office. So, you know, these are all the areas that we do need to make sure we are supporting candidates with. Equally for disabled candidates as well. How do we make sure that there are more inclusive campaigning methods to get them involved, get them out on the doorsteps as well? So a range of areas which I think, you know, we need to continue to support and fund. So I totally agree with you on that. On your point, Richard, and I think, again, it goes back to what I was talking about, in that all the work and all of us here in this room understand the need for that change. But our mission is to make sure other people come on that journey with us. It's no good me saying, as if there was a general election and if Labour were to win and I became the Minister for Democracy, that this is what I think would work. No, that's where we've been going wrong. So the citizens' assemblies, we have to build this from the bottom up. But equally being honest to people to say that not everything that you want to see change will happen. And this is why, taking them along with us on that journey, because I think far too often, no one asks for the introduction of voter ID. No one asks for the changes in postal votes to be changed. But yet it's been done to them. A lot of people won't be aware that their postal vote has changed, and they'll suddenly find that they're now off the postal vote form because you've got to reapply every 3 years. No one asks for that. So this is where I'm talking about how we make those changes, including people. And I think the citizens' assemblies are a key way of doing that. And I would love, you know, making sure, I'm a proud Brixtonian, but it's about getting out from Brixton, going to Bolton, Bolsover, all over to discuss this with issues. The very people who switch off when they see the news, who switch off from BBC Parliament because they say, you're all the same. We've got to convince them we're not. And if we empower them and be honest with them, I think far too often, we can't be all things to all people. So I'm not going to sit here and promise you and say, if we win and if I get elected, this is what I'll do. No, it's about talking with people, bringing them on that journey. On your point, Josiah, and sorry, I didn't catch your name at the back. Gavin, on voter ID. So I've raised this on a number of occasions with ministers directly in the chamber in terms of the voter ID. And what we are doing, what Labour is doing, we are still reviewing all the feedback from the Electoral Commission, still speaking to a number of groups. And I think, you know, we have to push the government in terms of, one, is this going to work? What's the impact going to be on the general election? Because that's going to be the first major election. But I think the premise still stands in that no legitimate voter should be locked out of voting. And that's what's happening. So is this system really worth it? And that's something that I would be pushing with my colleagues for us to really investigate and look into more.
Thank you so much. Florence, can I just have a final round of applause for that fascinating, insightful? Thank you so much.